Antara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Working?
Which class is today? Part 9. Streaming is 3 months.
Can I start? No. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're continuing our discussion of the Brahma Vimohan Lila. And in our last meeting, we discussed the fact that Brahma, observing the luncheon of the cowherds, there's a famous verse that we start with. That is a verse describing Krishna surrounded by his friends in circles, taking lunch, and the startling insight of Brahma that here is the Yogi Bhuk, it looks like, who's Mahapurusha on my planet, appearing here. Yogi Bhuk means he's an eater, he eats sacrifices, and here he's eating, actually, in a real sense of the term, in a very extraordinary way. Beautiful description of Krishna with his flute and his belt and his cowherd horn. This is a verse that's an example of what Jiva Goswami refers to by the term mantramayi upasana. So to take a verse that describes a still picture of the moving picture of Krishna Lila and meditate through the remembrance of, repetition of that verse. The implication of it being that in due course it'll start to move, take you to the next scene, so to speak. That's called Svarasiki, compared to mantramayi. So it's like mantramayi is like a lake that's formed within a river that where everything's still, and because it's gotten quite wide and you can't, so the ripples aren't as apparent. It's a beautiful verse, and Sukadev recites it to his poetry to Parikshit Maharaj, and describing what Brahma has seen, and he's quite astounded by it. And so, as we heard, he wanted to test Krishna, and he's thinking that by his own arrangement, the calves have wandered, when in fact it's the arrangement of Krishna's own Lila Shakti. And while he's thinking he's independent and unseen, he's actually been drawn there by Krishna's own Aishvarya Shakti, answering to his own prayers, the result of which he doesn't even know entirely what they will be, what will come next in the course of his sadhana. Very exciting, the life of a sadhaka. He's getting a major installment here in terms of that which he has been those impressions which he's received along with his mantra at the time of initiation, the Gopal mantra. So thinking in this way, not understanding the entirety of the situation by any stretch of the imagination, the four-headed Brahma with all of his buddhi, this was a land that looked like, without lacking in knowledge, that was far, far beyond knowledge and understanding that he could arrive at with his heads alone. But not realizing that yet, he was allowed to believe that he had caused the calves to wander, captured them up. But he has some powers. By some magical power of his, put them in a cave. And now Krishna's gone to look for them. And of course, Krishna doesn't find them. And Krishna comes back, as we heard, and finds that the cowherd boys are now gone. So Brahma thinks that he's stolen those as well. But he's been covered by Krishna's Lila Shakti, and she, in the meantime, has taken the cows, the calves, and the cowherd boys and Krishna, and they're placed in their own dimension, their own Lila, their own Prakash. So the Lila is full of different precautions of different dimensions. It's something like if sometimes you're out in the long distance airplane, have all the movies playing at the same time, the different channels, you turn the channel, there's a movie. It's always going on. And so all the Leelas, every Leela, every minute, always going on at the same time. But everyone's not participating in all of them. This is how the uppercut Leela works, one aspect of it. So Krishna has confined himself to a particular prakash, a particular dimension in which the calves have wandered off. He's told the boys, don't worry, don't disturb yourself, continue to eat. That's what we came here for, have a picnic. I'll be right back. He goes off and he brings the calves back. Of course, it takes a day of Brahma for that to happen. But inside that particular prakash, that particular dimension, it seems only a minute. Krishna's gone for a minute, as he said, and he's come right back. Meanwhile, outside of that prakash, Brahma's Krishna's Shakti has manifested a Mayic form of the calves, a Mayic form of the boys. Brahma has taken them and put them in a cave. Now we've got two sets of boys, two sets of calves, right? The original, actual boys and calves, a Mayic form of them that Brahma stole, and who he thinks are the original boys and calves. Now Krishna could have just let Brahma come back and maybe that would have been enough, but he wants to take it to another level. So not only that, but as we'll see, he has other things in mind as well. So we come to today's verse. There's about 10 verses now in this section, which starts to gradually wean us from Sakyaras and bring us back to the Vatsalyaras that we heard at the very beginning of our narrative was in somewhat of competition with Krishna, because the center of his love is moving from that being focused on his parents to now being focused on his newfound friends, causing some distance between himself and his parents. But as we'll see, that doesn't mean he doesn't love them. So together, they cause one another to contract, or they cause Saki to contract. But he loves his parents and all the elders in Braj immensely. So Tata Krishno mudam kartum tan matrinam cha kasya cha ubayayitam atmanam chakre vishvakrit ishvara. After that, so it's a new section. Krishna mudam kartum tat matrinam cha chakasya cha. So two things are mentioned here, that after that, Krishna with mudam kartum, the idea of acting in a way that will be pleasing to tad matrinam, the mothers of all the boys. This is now come, as I say, now it's coming full circle. And the thought of having to return home is there, and how is he going to deal with that? And he has a special plan in mind, which is part of what's all going on here. Over and above his manifesting extraordinary opulence, teaching this to Brahma, and so on and so forth. And what? Tata Krishno mudam kartum tan matrinam cha kasya cha. Cha kasya cha indicates, and also with a view to give pleasure or delight Brahma. And the implication of this is in terms of the implications of the 18-syllable Gopal mantra that he's been initiated with, the Gopal mantra. So the mantra that more, of course, corresponds with Krishna himself, Gopal Krishna. This is revealed in Gopal Tapani Upanishad. Brahma recites there for all of us the history of his receiving that and so forth. One of the places we find it in the Bhagavatam, we find it in the Brahma Samhita also. So Krishna, as I said, through his omniscience, which is in the background, which is coming to the foreground now to deal with Brahma as he comes onto the scene. But while it's in the background, as he's just himself Brahma in the background, Krishna's bringing him into the picture, and as he comes into the now, he's going to focus a little bit on Brahma. Okay, he's here through my omniscience. I've heard his prayers. I've brought him here to give him clarity about the path that he's on in pursuit of Sakyabhav. And in order to do that, he needs to underscore in no uncertain terms the tattva, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. Because as we said, what? If Krishna is not the fountainhead of all divinity, if he is just an avatar of Narayan, then he doesn't have his own abode, where the possibility of interacting with him as a friend, for example, or as a mother, as a lover, would exist. That doesn't happen in Vaikuntha. God doesn't have parents in Vaikuntha. There's no Vatsalya rasa there. There's no Sakya rasa there. It's Dasya rasa and Shanta rasa and no rasa, mukti, different types and so on and so forth, as we've been discussing. So this Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam is very important. Again, it speaks to us of the idea, the fact that Narayan is an aspect of Krishna. Aishvarya is a subset of his Madhurya. He's the fountainhead of all divinity. So the Leelas that are being depicted on earth are something that are eternal. And his presence on earth is an invitation in human society for humans to enter into that. This is a portal, Prakat Lila, for sadhakas to enter into. From there, go to his Aprakat Lila in Goloka, his own Mahavaikuntha. There are some references to a Mahavaikuntha in some Puranas, and our Swami said, and that we're talking about Goloka there. They have sufficient references to support their idea, but this is key. Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. So Brahma hasn't figured this out yet. He's started to suspect, because after all, as we heard, Krishna liberated Aghasura and he got Sarupya Mukti. He got a form like Narayan inside of Krishna, which leads one to believe maybe Narayan's inside of Krishna. That's backwards. How can that be? So he's not sure. He's going to test Krishna here. He's not sure how to think about it. Krishna is going to underscore this now so that Brahma understands in no uncertain terms, and therefore he has the wherewithal, as he speaks about in the Gita. What does he say in the Gita? In the Chatur Shloki of the Gita, the 4 essential verses of the Gita identified by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he begins by saying, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pavartate. He says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, I'm the source of everything. Did you understand that? Aham sarvasya prabhavo. You didn't? Mata sarvam pavartate. Let me say it again. Everything comes from me. I'm the source of everything. Listen carefully. It doesn't look like it. I know that. I'm Parthasarathi. Yes, Arjun, which way you want me to turn? Rickshaw? Go. Turn left, turn right. I know it doesn't look like I'm the source of everything. Looks like my taxi driver here. But listen carefully. I'm the source of everything. Everything comes from me. And when I say everything, he says, I mean everything. Everything. My abode, it's just hard to figure out. My abode looks like a village. It's not overtly transcendental and wonderful, beyond with four-headed people and whatnot. It's that type of majesty and opulence. So you have to pay close attention to understand what it is. But everything is there. All the freedom in Brahman, all of the dasya, the shanta, all of the opulence of Vaikuntha, it's all there. whatever you could get out of Varnashram, there's a semblance of Varnashram there as well. Everything's there. And more, right? And the real wealth of the place that we find that we don't find anywhere else is its praying, right? Goloke or premodhan, Harinam Sankirtan. Narottam Thakur ki jai, he says. From that place, the wealth of its praying has been exported through the medium of Nam Sankirtan. And the bearer of that is Gaur Krishna himself. This was the method to his madness, right? Nam Sankirtan. So Brahma needs to understand this point. And Krishna's going to show it to him and everyone, if they pay attention to this chapter, so that you could not possibly be confused about it. Krishna says in the verse in the Gita I'm citing, everything comes from me. I'm the source of everything. And Maham Sarvasya Prabhavo Matasavam Prabhate Iti Matva Bhajante Mam Buddha Bhava Samanvita. Knowing this, he says, you're in a position for Raga Bhava Samanvita, to enter into come into my company, to worship me fully. In other words, it's true that in Golok, they don't know that Krishna is God, or they heard it, could be, but it's just not a factor, right? The praying, it makes him seem ordinary, and one of them overrides that. That's why we say that praying is the end, is vidya. It's the end of knowledge, actually. Fullest. Krishna says in the Gita, what Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam. I'm going to speak, he said, the 9th chapter at the very beginning, about the highest knowledge, the king of knowledge. Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam, the king of secrets. And what is it? He says it at the end. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mamnamaskuru. Become my devotee, think of me, offer respect to me. Do bhakti. That's the end of knowledge. Bhakti is the end of knowledge. To love him is to know him. And with this in place, he's saying, Krishna's 2 Bhagavan Swami, you have a cornerstone in place. If you properly understand the implications of this, and it's important. Jiva Goswami wrote a whole Sandarbha about this one pada, one line, Krishna's 2 Bhagavan Swayam. You got that in place, you're in a good position to engage in the type of bhajan that will enable you to enter into the realm that it speaks about implicitly. I'm the source of Narayan, and I have my own place, my own abode. Where the infinite appears finite-like, in order for the finite and the infinite to intimately associate. Right? If the infinite remains infinite in appearance, then how close can the finite get to the infinite? So he assumes a finite-like appearance for the sake of intimacy and gets lost in that intimacy, that praying. This is Krishna. Of course, he's not entirely lost. We know his all-knowing is there in the background, and so we have an instance of it. It's answering to the sadhaka who needs to get this piece of Siddhanta and Tattva in place in order to become accomplished in and attain that which the mantra that he's received affords him as a destiny. Eternal service of Gopal Krishna must be a place to do that. And he's in a facsimile of that place right now on earth. The Prakat Lila. This is all very mysterious. Brahma's just trying to get his head. So if you're having a hard time, Brahma's trying to wrap his forehead around it, right? So here the verse says that Krishna had 2 intentions. One intention to please Brahma by giving him the kind of siksha that will support his diksha, his initiation, the kind of teaching and instruction that will support the diksha like water on a seed, fertilizer that will cause it to grow and bear fruit. Krishna is a siksha guru and a diksha guru, both. as is normally the case, right? So what did he do? He had the intention to please them. So it said here what? The controller and maker of the world turned himself into the calves and boys. And this is now a third manifestation of the calves and the boys, right? The original calves and boys are in their own dimension with Krishna. Nothing out of the ordinary has happened, although whatever they're doing is super extraordinary, right? Their intimacy of play. There's the Mayic manifestation of the boys that are now in a cave with the calves hidden by Brahma. He doesn't know the original ones are still there. He thinks he's done away with the cowherd boys. He's going to look back and see all the boys are there. And all the calves are there, as if nothing's happened. What is he seeing now? A third set of calves, and boys that Krishna has manifest. He himself has expanded as all the calves and all the cowherd boys. Now, this sounds a little, very extraordinary. So Sukadev uses words here to help us understand it, right? He says what? He says, Ubhayaitam atmanam chakre vishvakrid ishvara. He basically says, Ishvara. He's the maker of the world. Now, of course, Brahma thinks he's the maker of the world. Of course, when he reflects, he knows I get power from Vishnu to do it, but it can get to his heads. I'm the maker of the world, sir. And everybody treats him like that. Not everybody knows that Brahma's power for his work of creation is derived from Vishnu. He has to footnote that. He has to educate everybody. He has to give references to what he says, right? Do credit where it's due, right? But that doesn't always happen, or the opportunity doesn't present itself. So many people think Brahma to be the world creator, and that's it. And so petitioning him as such, thinking of him as such, well, it may go to his head. But here the statement is made. This may sound extraordinary, but Vishvakrid Ishvara. He Ubayayitam Atmanam. He made his own self. Atmanam Chakre Vishvakrid Ishvara. He made his own self into all the calves and cowherd boys. So the point is, such things are possible for the Ishwar, the maker of the world, the real maker of the world, which making of the world is just like if I'm painting a beautiful picture on my easel, right? And then I want to change colors. Then I may take that brush, dip it in some water, and go like that on another easel. Go back and paint. Well, this one over here that's the material world. He's just doing that like that without thinking about it very much. That is his Maya, the power of his Maya Shakti, overseen by the partial expression of himself, the Mahavishnu, the Paramatma, the oversoul of the world, who's just sitting back and watching it all, witnessing. And it's fascinating in itself, no? The scientists can look at the tiny atom only and find a world inside of quarks and whatever else. Can't see them, but they're there. It's a mathematical way to arrive at the conclusion that they're there as invisible things inside the atom. What kind of world is it? So it's a big place. It's Maya. Maya means to measure. It's that which cannot be measured. Maya means a conception that we have of measuring. That's what the material world is. We think we can bring it within our grasp, but because you can't, it's called Maya. To think that you can measure it, that's Maya, and that is the world. And it is but ekapad vibhuti, one just fraction of the whole, right? The main show is is on the other side, in the Paravyam. We're in the shadows here. So for him to do this, is to manifest as the calves and cowherd boy, I mean, he's the maker of the whole world as a side effect. So it's not a big thing, Sukadeva wants to say. So some description of how well he did that keeps us for a moment within the fold of Sakirasa before we move completely to this now other, just newly introduced purpose in terms of what Krishna wants to accomplish, who he wants to delight besides Brahma. He's obviously delighting the cowherd boys. We're in the midst of that. Now the mothers as well, right? But first, we hear a detailed description from Sukadeva as to the extent to which he was able to duplicate the forms of the cowherd boys and the calves. Sukadeva says, Krishna, the Aja. Brahma is often referred to as Aja, unborn, because, if you don't have a mother, well, you could say you weren't born. How that would work, ask Brahma. Sounds pretty far out, but as we'll see here, there's another idea that's more attractive to him now that he's becoming acquainted with it. And by the way, he's only relatively unborn. The real unborn is Krishna. The real maker of the world is Krishna. The real unborn is Krishna. And the real unborn takes birth from a mother in Braj. Brahma's trying to get a hint here. I'd be better off being born from a mother in Braj than to be born on the lotus, which gives me such fame and notoriety and so on and so forth. So much attention, I'm Brahma, and so forth. I'd be better off just an unknown in the world, to be known in this world of his realm. This is what Brahma will come to. As one of the sons of the mothers whom he, Krishna, loves without limit. And Brahma will say this, in effect, in his prayers. He basically says, he thinks, maybe Krishna is going to think that because I'm Brahma and I've got this abhiman of being a controller and a important person, maybe I should take birth in the Yadu dynasty if I want to get closer to him, rather than in the lowly cowherd community. Well, that won't work for you, Brahma, will it? And so Brahma wants to just dismiss that idea. No, I want to take birth there. I want to take birth from a mother in Braj, become a cowherd boy. This is the way. So anyway, description of the cowherd boys. We'll get to all this further. Krishna, the unborn one, the underlying identity of all, who, underlying identity of all was so many small bodies of calf herders and calves in whichever way their hands, feet, and other parts of the body were, and so many staffs, horns, flutes, leaves, their lunch bags, ornaments, garments of the same kinds as theirs, to the extent that the temperaments, virtues, voices, shapes, age, amusement, and so on were as before. Hence, he was resplendent as though he was the embodiment of the text. Everything is imbued with Vishnu. That's the famous Sarvakalo Vidam Brahma. Brahma here means Brahman, Vishnu. Everything is Vishnu. So Sukadeva is saying he showed, this is a famous statement that has different interpretations, but it was never fully understood, is what Sukadeva is saying. It says, Vishnu is everything. Sarvam kalo idam brahma. I mean, Shankar, for example, completely misunderstands it. He thinks it's saying there's only Brahma. Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj once said, the verse says everything is Brahman. So that means there's Brahman and there's everything is also. And everything is Brahman. We don't do away with everything, as Shankar does. Everything is there. And in a way, it's all Brahman. How is it all Brahman? Well, it's being explained here. The underlying identity of all, Krishna himself, means who's one with his Shakti and different from it at the same time. So in his own commentary on this section of the texts where Krishna's identity now with the cowherd boys is being explained, and as we see in great detail, he completely replicated them, not only them, their forms, their ages, their paraphernalia, their sticks, their fruits, their lunch bags, but also internally, their dispositions, their specialities of their, well, particulars of their individuality, their temperaments, and so forth, each of which is different, even while it falls within a particular type of Sakyabhav, of which there are four. Still, each one is individual, different tastes, different likes, different temperament, and so forth. The implication is that how well, from Sakyaras's point of view, how well he knew them. They are him. That's the Bade point of view. So now to Goswami in this section, these couple of verses, it says, refer to my Brihad Bhagavatamrita, that is where the term comes from. What term am I referring to? Important term, describing our tattva of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, our metaphysic. Veda Bed, Achintya Veda Bed. Very good. Achintya Veda Bed. It means those forms of those boys, the original boys, they are non-different from him. We've discussed this earlier to some extent. That's Siddharupa, spiritual form. It's existing in a sense in the depths of the being of God, of Krishna. Your praying that you've cultivated warrants a form in which you can express it. It arises out of his Shakti, which exists only for his pleasure. And that form thereby, in essence, is an extension of his own form, because he has a tongue, he has 2 ears, he has 2 eyes, he has 2 hands to reach Krishna. But I mean, he has an appetite to taste rasa that calls for many ears, many tongues, many eyes. I mean, what did Rupa Goswami say about his name? That when I chant his name, I have trouble taking advantage of all the sweetness that he possesses, and therefore I pray for millions of tongues and millions of ears. When the name enters into the courtyard of my heart and dances there, I wish I had millions of ears. I wish I had millions of tongues to take advantage of this 2 syllables, Krishna. This is the problem for the guru. He needs help. She needs help. With the mantra is, the name is driving Sri Guru mad, needs help. Prabhupada said, I gave out the holy name to experiment. If I get some more ears, some more tongues, we could all get together and try to extend our capacity to relish something that we call Krishna, that is unlimited. Now this is the Krishna himself. He's Rasaraj. Right? Well, he's the king of relishing. And even he, to relish himself, to fulfill his epithet as Rasaraj, needs associates. Krishna is like sweetness, like sugar, but sugar can't taste itself. So to manifest extensions of himself, expansions of himself, his own swarup, shakti. Krishna has ananda of his swarup. It's called swarupananda. So of his form, his nature, it's full of ananda. And then he has swarup shakti ananda. That means from his form and nature, his primal shakti manifests associates with whom, through whom he then reflects back upon himself and interacts with himself. And this is then the sugar, sweetness, tasting itself. For rasa, there has to be two, and Brahman is rasa, as the Taittiriya Upanishad says. In the Bali, in the chapter, in that Shruti, in that Upanishad, about Ananda. That's what it's about. It concludes, Raso Vaisaha, and he, Brahman, is rasa. And by knowing him as such, it goes on to say what? You can taste rasa yourself. So now we're speaking about the original boys, right? They're all Swarup Shakti Ananda, as are the calves, as are the mothers, and so on and so forth, right? For the most part. There are also Tatastha Shakti Jivas who have come there and are imbued with Tatastha Shakti, sadhana siddhas. They're all, for all intents and purposes, they are the same. But they've come there by following in the footsteps, in the wake of the bhav of these Parshad associates, original associates of Krishna, his Sudam, his Sridham, his Subal, his Jasoda, Nanda, and so on and so forth. You can't have Krishna as the son of Nanda without having Nanda. You can't have Yashoda Nandan without Yashoda. So this is an important theological point that Jiva Goswami in his Bhagavad Sandarbha labors to underscore. Krishna has Swarup Shakti. God has a Swarup Shakti. The two are one and different. So if you're going to have love, okay, well, that's good. You have to have some object to repose the love in for there to be love. So you need both. You need a teacher, you need a student. What one fellow told me, I think I'm going to be a guru. I said, well, let me know when you have some students. I'll consider it then. What's the meaning? So you're going to be a teacher, it means, well, there's students. You can't have a teacher without students, right? So you cannot have love without the object of love and without the love itself taking shape and interacting with you. So this is Veda Veda. Krishna is one and different at the same time. So he's underlying reality of all things. And with regard to his own abode, these associates of his, they're not different from him. When you get a form like that of one of his associates, through sadhana and the ingress of that Swarup Shakti into your own life, then I say, out of the depths of the being of God, a form will arise suitable to correspond with that praying. And that form, in another sense, when we look at it from the Veda point of view, from the Abeda, non-different, this is another form of Krishna. Krishna's got another tongue now. He's got other ears. He's got more legs to walk further into the forest, examine another cave, right? As may be the case. So, therefore, you can understand, the point being that Krishna knows these boys inside out and backwards. Like he knows his own self, he knows them. So his capacity to duplicate them, well, he's not limited in any way in that regard. And the test will be, of course, well, he has to now head home with the calves and the boys, and they're going to go to the cows and they're going to go to the mothers. And as we'll see, as the implication here is in the first description of this, He's done a pretty good job of it. Hmm? There's nothing he missed whatsoever. He knows how they tie their belt. He knows what's in their lunch bag if he wants to, right? Not only is he, you have to understand, not only is he the boys, he's the lunch bags too. He's the flutes, he's their sticks, he's their turbans. That's what's being said here. And not only is it the externally, but internally, their dispositions, as I said, their sentiments, their memories, everything. I mean, this is just the beginning of the mind-boggling display of his Aishvarya when you step back and see the whole picture, which of course Brahma is going to see. But here, how much he loves those boys, how well he knows them, right? Now, well, as we go forward, Swayam Atmana Govatsan Tripurari Atma Vatsapai Kridan Atma Viharischa Sarvatma Prabhishad Brajam. Swayam Atmatma Govatsan. So it says, Sukadeva says, he made the calf herders, who were he, restrain the calves, which were he, while he himself was having fun with amusements, which were he, which he was. Being the self of all in this way, he entered the cowherd village. So Krishna's amusing himself, expanded himself as all the calves, all the cowherd boys. And it's mentioned here that Swayamatma Atma Govatsan, that the cows were a little older. This point will bear significance as we go forward. They were a little old. They were old enough to go out and herd all day. And they would not be of an age that typically they were nursing. They would have been weaned by now. But as we'll see, well, their mothers, the cows, gave precedence to them over the calves that were actually of an age where it was suitable, appropriate for them to be nursing. Why? Because, of course, now their calves were Krishna himself. Now, Sanatana Goswami raises a point here. By the use of the word sarvatma, the soul of all, a difference from the previous calves and boys is shown. Hence, that the new forms were lesser than old forms is meant, in the sense that the old ones were recipients of the Lord's deep affection. So this is now from Krishna's point of view. They're perfect. They're perfect from the mother's point of view, as we'll see, and the cow's point of view. But from Krishna's point of view, these cows, calves, and cowherd boys, which are now himself, are lesser than the original boys, which are his Swarup Shakti Ananda. This is his own Swarup now. This is Krishna himself. You understand the difference? The boys are manifestations of his internal Shakti, through whom he can taste himself, right? As I explained. But now these boys, the difference is from his point of view, well, he can't interact with them in the same way. They're him. In a more objective, literal sense, not in a beta-bade sense, which makes for sweetness and enough difference inside the oneness that there can be taste. You follow? This is quite a complex theology that we have here. And Sanatana Prabhu, he quotes a famous statement from the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, where Durvas, having offended Ambarish and then being chased by Krishna's Vishnu's chakra, trying to get away from him, entered into Vaikuntha. He went to Brahma. Brahma couldn't do anything. He went to Shiva. Shiva couldn't help him. He had offended Ambarish Maharaj, and so Krishna's chakra manifested and started to chase him. Durvas was a Gyani. So he entered Vaikuntha. Now you might wonder how Durvas could enter Vaikuntha, because he's a Gyani and he had offended a Vaishnava. Sometimes the example is given of a king for entertainment in his palace, brings a tiger into the room in a cage, and all the guests look at the tiger and so forth. So he's there, but he's not there, right? He's there, but he's inside of a cage. So sometimes some people like this can come into Vaikuntha to entertain the residents of Vaikuntha. Oh, look at that animal is coming here. Wild person. Goodness. For the evening's attainment in the palace of Vaikuntha. So anyway, Durvas came in and Krishna, Narayan, I should say, explained to him that how dear his devotees are to him, which is the point being made here, right, in the commentary. The verse says, Durvas said, Brahman, O Brahmana, without my devotees who are saintly, for whom I am the highest goal, I desire neither my own self nor my limitless opulences. So without my devotees, I don't care about myself. What's the meaning of myself? We've already explained this to some extent. But this is a special circumstance, right? He's trying to accomplish a few things. Meanwhile, keep in mind, he's in another Prakash and the Leela's going on. With his original friends, with the cabs, there's no disturbance, and they're continuing to have their picnic. But for special reasons, for giving pleasure to Brahma through enlightening him, which the Guru may give pleasure to us by enlightening us, by pulling on our ear, listen up. So it's a little awkward for Brahma. He's going to grow here, right, in his sadhana. And growth is sometimes a little painful. So Gurudev is not there just to pat us on the back and say everything's all right, but he meant to push us, challenge us. He meant to challenge our understanding so that we may grow. So don't be put off by that opportunity when it arises. We need to grow, right? So Brahma's undergoing the growth pains, but is referred to as Krishna wants to please him. He has his good fortune in mind, right? And of course, now on another level, he wants to please the mothers who have already arrived. Some of whom are eternal associates of his Parshadas, manifestations of his Sarup Shakti, like Sridham Subal are in the realm of Sakya, fraternal love. So Yashoda, Nanda, other ladies of the village and so forth, and elderly and their husbands and so forth. And then, just like amongst the cowards, we heard, the coward boys, there are three groups, right? There are the eternal associates like Sridham and Sudam, right? And then there are sadhakas who come from earth, and some from the celestial realm. At the time of Krishna's appearance, both are considered sadhakas. This is a type of siddha, sadhana siddha. They are tatastha shakti, but they become imbued with swarup shakti. They can function entirely in that realm, right? Similarly, there's scope for entering into Braj in Vatsalya Rasa. I've mentioned before that a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Balaba, didn't quite fit in his group, amongst Chaitanya's associates. Mahaprabhu authorized him to have his own group, right? And in that group, in that sampradaya, it's the Rudra Sampradaya. He's prominent in it, so much so sometimes referred to as the Balaba Sampradaya. The famous Sridhar Swami, whose commentary on Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so much respected, and all the Goswamis refer to in their commentaries, he's from that Sampradaya. So these are close. They resemble one another in a different way. They're both Rag Marg Sampradayas, communities, lineages that result in a Rag Marg type of end in Braj. But in that group, there's some emphasis. One of the main emphases is on Vatsalya Rasa. So a window there provided by Vallabha. I've mentioned before, at the end of his dissertation on sadhana bhakti, Rupa Goswami writes, and there's another group, they call it Vaidhi Bhakti, excuse me, the sadhana practice of Vaidhi Bhakti. He says, and there's another group, they call it Markata, Maryada. And then in this section on Rag Bhakti, which follows, the sadhana of Rag Bhakti, at the end he says, and there's another group, they call it Pushti. Yeah, similar. Pushti is then also division then of the Vallabha Sampradaya. Corresponds with the Rag Marg sector of Gaudiya Sampradaya. So through that path, then some people may enter in Vatsalya Bhav. It's possible. And so we come to that because what? He, the original form of those various boys, drove their respective calves, placed them in their respective cowsheds, and entered the boys' respective homes, O king, and there they were, as you can imagine, greeted by their mothers with not the normal affection, but now their affection for their sons exceeds what the norm. The norm is that they love their sons unlimitedly. And they love their sons as they love their husbands, and husbands love them, and each one, the sons, the mothers, the fathers, the sisters, each of them loves one another unlimitedly, and each of them loves Krishna more unlimitedly. So there's no problem there. If in your household, sons, the daughters, husband, the wife, all love Krishna more than one another and love one another unlimitedly, then you got a real recipe for eternal family, right? So they all agree on this point without thinking about it. It's natural, it's spontaneous, and so forth. Now these mothers, they didn't know, per se, that Krishna was now manifest in the form of their sons. They loved their sons, still their affection for their sons increased so much. And at the same time, this affection will be affected, if you will, or brought about by a sense of possessiveness. I think Jiva Goswami gives this term possessiveness, by bodily relationship, and by beauty. So they had affection for the boys in terms of possessiveness. They're my sons, our sons, my son, and bodily relationship, right? But there was some fault in it. What? That the beauty of the boys, which was unlimited, was exceeded nonetheless by the beauty of Krishna. So while they loved their boys more because Krishna was their boy, their affection arose out of possessiveness and out of bodily affection, but Krishna was still more beautiful. How it can be. He's more beautiful than Sridham, and Sridham's unlimitedly beautiful. So everything was in order. It's just that the order of affection just rose to a new level. It's all very mystical. And as we'll see, it will startle Balaram as he becomes aware of it. So far, he's like conspicuous by his absence in all of this. he'll come next, the next section, to underscore the extraordinariness of what we're trying to relate. Now, I mentioned that these mothers, some of these mothers were sadhana siddhas. So they have a desire to have Krishna as their mother, or excuse me, as their son. Now, given the nature of the Leela, they feel that Krishna is their son. There's no lacking in one sense. Krishna is their son because there's a shared responsibility amongst the mothers of the sons in a village. You can even experience that here. Practically speaking, you ask one, do you know that guy? Oh yeah, he's my cousin. Do you know that girl? Yeah, she's my nephew. Yeah, it's all like related, right? So there's in the village scene, there's the family sensibilities are extended and grown. So the Braj is a village. So the maternal affairs, which in one sense are primarily taking care of the children in that setting, are shared by the mothers. It's described earlier on in the Vatsalya center of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, surrounding the Damodar Lila. We're in one of the Sakyarasa center. We're getting a slight segue back now to the motherly section, because why? In the Vatsalya center of the 10th canto, in the earlier chapters surrounding the Damodar Lila, there's no description of an entry point there. Here we find an entry point in the Prakat Lila for sadhakas. But I'll get to that. But in that description of Vatsalya Bhav, what do we find? We find that Krishna is leaving the house, going to the neighbor's house and stealing butter and yogurt, giving it to the monkeys, causing a disturbance, all to the delight of the other mothers, who, when their husbands come home from cow herding, will write, and that Krishna came over and he did this and he did that, and they're just totally, and the sons are going, I want to meet him. Sounds like a good friend. Their friendship has not yet, just a little bit. They're learning how to steal from him and so forth. So point is that these mothers, they were well aware. When Damodar, Krishna, was tied by his own mother to the mortar, right, during the Damodar Lila, which is here at the center of it all, the Vatsalya Rasa section of Bhagavatam. And the neighboring ladies were all looking over the wall and throwing rope over. Here, add more rope to make up for the 2 inches short that the ribbon in your hair is to tie him. And of course, the more she added Yasoda rope to the ribbon, it still remained 2 inches too short. And everybody was just fascinated by this. This is another example of Achintya Beta Beta. He's everywhere. He's not getting fatter and fatter every time she tries to tie the rope around him. But she can't, but he's the whole world. He's everything. You can't wrap him up. Except by praying. When he sees her perspire, her effort, she gives grace. He gives grace. And suddenly then, with just the 2 inches of with just the ribbon from her hair, she could tie him up. She tied him up with the ribbon. You would think that when he pulled on the mortar and wedged it between the 2 Arjun trees, the ribbon would surely break. Just a ribbon, rather than the trees fall down, which you wouldn't expect at all anyway from just a child. But the trees fell down and the ribbon didn't break. That is the strength of her love. She actually chased him because she had chastised him and he started to run, and she chased after him, in fear that he wouldn't come back. She wanted to tie him up that he wouldn't leave out of love for him. So anyway, the point is the other mothers in the community were all looking over and amused by him. And he had been to their house earlier in the day, and they would report it to Yashoda, and she'd be in denial. But I don't think that's true. I mean, why don't you keep it? If he's there, maybe you don't keep your other fire. They said, no, he climbs up on other boys' shoulders. And well, why don't you put it in the dark, in a cool place where he can't see? Well, wherever he goes, he lights the place up. So they keep replying back. She keeps in denial, but of course it affects her. She can't go to sleep that well at night. Oh, they're all complaining. She talks to Nanda. It must be your fault. You got 900 to 1,000 cows, right? And you don't, but they don't supply sweet enough milk to keep our boy at home. He's going to the neighbor's house for milk, and they're complaining. It's your fault. If there's any truth to what they say, it's your fault. Do something about it. Of course, then he gets some special cows, puts on special grasses and grazes them. That takes us, of course, now we're transported to the Govardhan Lila, right? Because those special cows are grazing on those special grasses to remedy the situation, it corresponds with anyway, in Govardhan Lila, then what? She's nursing him. She puts him down because this special milk that Nana has been providing over the years. Damodar Lila? Well, in the Damodar Lila, he started providing, and it's been providing it for a few years. Now the Govardhan Lila is coming, and all the nursemaids and everybody in the house are out arranging for Indra Yagya and so forth. She's nursing from the breast, and the milk's boiling over the stove. And this is the perfect milk that Nana's gone to the trouble to get, and for years has been producing to keep her quiet the neighbors and pacify Yashoda and so on and so forth. And of course, she puts her son down, and so that the milk doesn't boil over. And we go to the Govardhan Lila. Krishna's traumatized by that, and well, in the Govardhan Lila, I should say, he remembers this. This happened in my childhood. Now it's Govardhan Lila. This is the guy they were worshiping on that day, and the milk boiled over. Now I'm old enough to think about this. He traumatized me as a child, so I'm gonna have to chastise him, something like that. So anyway, the point is what? That these mothers, they have full Vatsalya Ras for Krishna. They love him as their own son, but he's not their son. He is and he isn't, right? Every son is their son. Every son in Braj is the son of Yashoda. As I said, she knows every one of those favorite dishes, and she knows their disposition. And if she sees them, she says, "Come, Subhakya, sit on my lap. What's on your mind? I know what's on your mind. Krishna did this, right? Yes. She'll pacify him and so forth. Go back and you tell him. So it's not that they don't have Vatsalya Bhav for Krishna, and they're not getting that kind of reciprocation, but still, he is their son, but he's not kind of physically their son. So now he wants to please these sadhana siddhas. He knows what it took for them to get there. All the trials and tribulations, all the doors that were slammed in their face as they begged alms on behalf of the deity of Krishna, going door to door. All of the troubles that they had to encounter for living a life as a sadhaka, which are many. He knew everything about that. He's knowing it about Brahma. He's calling Brahma, right? They have already done it. They've arrived. They have taken birth in Braj. In his commentary, well, in his explanation of Rag Bhakti as a sadhana, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, towards the end of that section, Rupa Goswami gives an example. He says, and there was a carpenter, according to such and such Purana, who wanted to have Krishna as his son. So he established the deity of Krishna, and in his sadhaka deha, his practitioner's body, he worshipped him like a son, or treated him like a son. Treated the deity like a son. And he perfected his practice. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes a comment there. He says, he didn't meditate on him in a siddha deha, an internal meditative body that Rupa Goswami says earlier is an aspect of Rag Bhakti, Seva Sadhaka Rupena Siddha Rupena Chatrahi. In Rag Bhakti, we'll worship Krishna in a sadhaka deha, in ways that are appropriate in this practitioner's body, like offering arati and so forth. And then in the meditative internal body, we'll serve like a mother in this case, or like a friend in meditation on the Lila. Now, the latter, properly understood, will arise out of the former. If bhava arises out of sadhana, what is the purpose of sadhana? To attain bhava bhakti. Sadhana bhakti begets bhava bhakti. It's already existing, that bhava, but that bhava will manifest within you when you do the sadhana to make room for that, clearing the heart and so on and so forth, developing a taste. So if sadhana bhakti in this sense results in bhava bhakti, then a sadhaka deha, properly engaged practitioner's body, will result in a bhava deha. At which time, in bhava bhakti, you can do siddha rupena seva. You have to have that body to do that seva. What Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's point is in this section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu I'm citing is that this carpenter, he states that he did not do siddha rupena seva. He just worshiped the deity in his sadhaka rupa, and he attained this. So the point I'm making only is, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, you're going to find different descriptions and different paribars, how to attain this ideal. Some nuanced differences in the Abhideya Tattva. Oh, the Guru has to give you this Sadhasurupa, Siddharupa, or no, he doesn't. Or he gives it partly, or he gives a protocol of it, a prototype of it, or there are many different ways. Thing is, it doesn't matter in one sense. You have to give your all in all. The point is, in your sadhaka deha. In the sadhaka deha, you have to perspire before you're going to weep. And the more that you give of your sadhaka, you do sadhana, the more you're going to get bhava, the more you use your sadhaka deha properly. Guru gives you a sadhaka deha. And you think, Gurudev, what about my siddha deha? You don't like what I gave you? All right. You don't understand the siddha deha if you ask that question, because it arises out of it. In the later stages of sadhana, then it will start to take shape. And then we enter into bhava bhakti. It will arise naturally through practice. Guru can give some, should give some guidelines, help us to focus and so on and so forth. But this point is nicely brought out at the very end of that section on Raga Bhakti, in the comments of Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who also say what, relevant to our point, that carpenter attained Vatsalya Bhakti, Vatsalya Rasa. And as a result of that attainment in his sadhaka deha, well, he got a siddha deha. He entered into bhava. He got a siddha deha, goes without saying, a siddha rupa. And then he took birth and entered. And at the time of this Brahma Vimohan Lila, the fullness of his ambition to serve Krishna, Vatsalya Rasa, was realized. I don't know if he became a father or a mother, but he attained Vatsalya Rasa. So Krishna knows what the sadhaka has gone through. All of you, all of us. It doesn't go unnoticed. Somebody else might not recognize you. You're not looking for it anyway. Don't look for recognition. Krishna's watching everything you do. Don't try to see God. Act in such a way that God will want to see you. That's darshan. Did you have darshan? See the deity? It means, did the deity see you? He did. What was I doing? Oh, goodness. I'm on the altar of sacrifice. And he's observing how well I'm doing that. And we're patiently trying to help. He knows all the struggles I've gone through, all the ups and downs. Don't look for recognition from somebody else. Oh, you could become a sannyasi. get better prasadam and higher seats, and everyone respect you and so forth. Don't think like that. It's not for that, right? So this is the portal then. They entered this time, and the text here goes on to say, oh, these mothers, their affection, their breast milk flowed to new heights, and Krishna drank with all of the mouths of all of the cowherd boys, the flow of the milk. And he's already like 5 years old. And they're giving their breast milk to him, and the breast milk is described as like heavenly and like rum, the text says, intoxicating at the same time. They're intoxicated in giving that. He's intoxicated by taking that. So they're the fullest measure of their ambition in sadhana, as audacious as it is to think, I will love Krishna like this. He will sit on my lap. God will nurse from my breast. And they're realizing it. Such are the possibilities, especially now, to the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Brahma's about, to see all of this. He's going to return, see all the boys are still there. And what? Next verse. Thereafter, O king, he says to the Raj, as the forms of those various boys, Madhava, who had gone to their respective homes at dusk because of the rules for that time of the day, was pampered by the mothers at first by being massaged, bathed, adorned, anointed, protected with tilak, then given food and so forth, all while enrapturing them with resplendent gestures. So he's talking to the king. He mentions, "O king, Raj." You can imagine, how boys are treated in the palace. They get the princes, they get royal treatment and so forth. It's something like that. They were given the royal treatment at home, massaged with oils, decorated with tilak, bathed, cooked for, everything. So the mothers were doing this for a year, for one whole year, right? They had this opportunity. And here Krishna is addressed as Madhava. So Madhava also, well, it means the husband of the goddess of fortune, named for God. It also means knowledge, vidya. So Dava, who carries or is the pati, the lord of knowledge. So what implied here is again this emphasis that all these boys were chit shakti, not material. A small point that I'm sure you've already understood. And with that, we come to the end of this section. Swiftly arriving at the cowpens, well, it said he was out for 9 hours. There are certain rules. If you're out with calves, you got to be back at a certain time, about 3 hours before the sun sets. But Krishna did everything right. This was a difficult day. I mean, if you didn't know everything, well, the boys got stolen, and the whole picnic was spoiled, and he was going to come back without them. But everything was perfect. Nothing that Brahma did had any effect whatsoever on the just normal course of activity. In fact, if anything, it served only to increase that which was the essence of the whole affair that he's now just becoming acquainted with, the nature of prema. He's seeing that this prema is such that it's unlimited and ever increasing at the same time. I mean, this is mind-boggling to him. The typical idea, of course, of mukti is a static type, if you will, of eternal bliss, ending the suffering of material existence, eternal bliss. Some movement there in Vaikuntha, no doubt. Dasya, Shanta, stunted forms of Dasya in comparison to Golok. There, prem, the term prem really applies. Motherly prem. He's seen Sakya prem. He's seeing motherly prem. He, in his prayers later on, as I said earlier, he's going to glorify, before he, in no uncertain terms, glorifies the virtues of the Sakya prem that he's brought into the circle of, that he has been without fully that he has been pursuing without knowing exactly how to do it. Now he's getting some further siksha. Before he says, Aho bhagyam nanda gopa brajokasam, yan mitram paramanandam puna brahma sanatanam. He, in the verse prior to that, in his prayers, he glorifies Vatsalya Rasa. He's seeing what Krishna's doing here. Of course, it all hasn't been revealed to him yet. His prayers, he's reflecting on it after everything's been shown to him. When the boys are shown to be Krishna himself, to Brahma, etc. But at that time, he says, as I said earlier, I'm Aja. I'm said to be unborn. I'm born in a lotus flower. People think that's cool, but I want to be born of a real mother in Braj. A real mother means a sat, an eternal mother. I want to be born in that place. I want to take birth in the Prakat Lila as a cowherd boy. That's my ideal. So I know you all have your fathers and mothers, but you have to come to identify with Nanda and Yashoda. They're the king of fatherhood and motherhood in Braj. No one could care for you more. You'll be in good hands there. So swiftly arriving to the cow pens, afterward the cows made their respective older calves, which were called by mooing sounds, and were assembled to drink milk, which was trickling from their udders. The cows repeatedly licked their calves. So now a little bit on the same thing with the cows, right? They're about Salyabhav. As I said, these were older calves. They shouldn't have been milking, but they neglected the calves that whose time it was to give milk to these calves. And so as a whole, the cows and the cowherd ladies' motherhood mood towards him was just as before, save an increase, except for the increase in affection. So with this, we come to a close of this section, and we'll follow it tomorrow with Balaram's observing all of this after years passing, just a few days before the end of the year, and seeing it for himself and becoming curious about what's happening here. We call it Brahma Vimohan. Here it's Balaram Vimohan even. So very extraordinary display of Shakti on Krishna's part, by which he's accomplishing so many things. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad ki jai, Dauji Gopal ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Brinda ki jai, Gaur Premanande. Any question?
Guru Maharaj?
Yeah.
There was a story about this fake form of Sita being married by Narayan later. Is there any story about those additional?
Wait a minute, story of Sita marrying Narayan?
Sita's fake form that was kidnapped by Ravana.
Ravana, yeah.
That she later married Vishnu. There is some South Indian story about it.
Raj, there are all kinds of stories and all kinds of angles out there. Hinduism accepts a multifaceted Godhead. It has different faces and asankhya, an unlimited number of forms, expansions, avatars, and so on and so forth. This is so much part of Hinduism that people have no problem making up local gods even. And it's just a worshipable culture. So that's what they do. we are concerned with what Gaudiya Vaishnavism says. We are Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So someone may say this book may say that. Our way of understanding that is what? Therefore, we turn to the Sandarbhas. Jiva Goswami said, the hub around which all of the sacred texts orbit is what? What is it? No, what's the book? Srimad Bhagavatam. So whatever statement is made here in South India, North India, West India, California, it doesn't about Krishna, this, that, we'll say, okay, that it might be, but it might not. But what does the Bhagavatam say? We'll evaluate it in relation to the Bhagavatam. There are statements that Krishna is Balaram's the incarnation of Anantasesh. So there's a way of looking at it like that, but the Bhagavatam gives us another angle of vision to look at it. Right? That Anantasesh is the incarnation of Balaram, for example. And it gives good reason why, also. And it gives that understanding, that tattva, affords us an opportunity to experience a certain bhava also. If, for example, Balaram is the incarnation of Anantasesh, you got the same problem as if Krishna is the incarnation of Narayan. You haven't got a Goloka, for example. So we shouldn't be troubled by or these kind of, there are all kinds of statements out there, and there are all kinds of angles of vision also. Some of them are accurate, some of them are not. We're not recommending that you just make up gods, but they do that, and goddesses. But we're concerned with what the Goswamis' window of opportunity, what window of opportunity they've afforded us. What's their focus, their lens, how they're looking at the gem of Shyam Sundar and his associates, what facets they're highlighting. That's all we care about. So we don't think, oh, they said it over there. How I'm bewildered now. Shouldn't be bewildered at all. There's nothing to be bewildered about. Yeah, we expect that there are going to be other ideas and thoughts about it. But look at them comparatively. Why we would think that there's plenty of ways to think that that's problematic. You could say, well, okay, if you want to one way to understand, okay, so Sita became the wife of Narayan, right? Well, Ram and Narayan, it is the same. Ram lives in Vaikuntha, in Ayodhya. So, yeah.
My question was rather in reference to those additional dark-haired boys that were in the cave. Like, did they join?
The Maya ones?
Yeah.
Well, in the Ram Lila, there's a Maya Sita that was formed. You're saying the Maya Sita married Narayan?
No, I mean in this case of cowherd boys being put in cave, like this Naika cowherd boys, they joined or they just entered the bodies of.
They disappeared. They became unmanifest. They stayed there. Brahma went to the cave and saw they're still there. And he went back and saw the coward boys are still there. Went to the cave. He thought Krishna must be running there and bringing them back. And we'll get into that. And he realized this is like beyond my four heads. So they were just temporary manifestations of facsimiles of the boys. And the description of them is, oh, they're facsimiles enough to delude Brahma. But the facsimiles of the boys that were Krishna himself, they were boys in all details. They satisfied everyone except Krishna in that setting, who didn't have them to associate with, although in the other dimension, it's continuing. What else? Another question? Anything from online? No. Yes.
I'm a little confused, Comrade, with this.
Me too.
You said that, maybe I got this wrong, the calves and the boys who were hijacked, are they the Swarup Shakti Ananda?
No.
But the other way around.
There were no boys hijacked. Brahma thought he hijacked them. But what happened is that Krishna's Shakti manifested false boys. They were Mayak and thus able to be influenced by the magic of Brahma. The real boys stayed with Krishna, and then Krishna manifested a third set of boys who were himself. You understand?
So it's not.
Those three sets, yes.
Is that because Krishna knew what Brahma was about to do?
Yeah, sure. Brahma came there. He was going to display his power to test Krishna. Krishna could understand it and said, well, I brought you here to show you my power. So I'm going to show it to you now, which makes your power look very insignificant in comparison, right? All right, we'll stop there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Maharaj.